So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in Yeshayahu the prophet, let's then make a comparison regarding then sections of what we know as then the New Testament. And in fact, the word New Testament, it's a bit strange because as far as we can understand from the holy instructions, the foundation of the apostles and prophets is the Torah. Now the problem is the New Testament is very contradictory. The reason why it's because it's not consistent as far as the teachings of then Shaliach Shaul, principally. And that's where then our quest becomes even more profound when we begin to ponder if this person ever existed. Understandably, Shimon and then the other apostles, or then Shilishim, the sent ones, they had a direct relation with the Hamashiach ben Yosef himself. And this Hamashiach ben Yosef, while he was then teaching the holy instructions, he was being guided by the divine presence while then he was completing the spring feast. Now then, later on, strangely, we find then Shaliach Shaul never had a contact with the Hamashiach ben Yosef. And then he comes from the tribe of Benjamin, and for some reason he has then some sort of enlightenment. The whole thing is extremely suspicious because the originality of the instructions related with the New Testament becomes a bit more interestingly searched, and we find that a lot of situations the Shaliach Shaul said truly wasn't true. Now, was it because of the bad translation, or was because it was a person invented? Shaliach Shaul, as we understand, he wrote many kinds of documents where there is absolutely no trace yet found from the Hebrew manuscripts. He is a person that was relating areas they do not fit with the foundation of the apostles and prophets, because a lot of verbiage of Shaliach Shaul discredits the Torah. Now, people always like to step on and stay on the top of the fence as if they were in a civil war. Then at some point they are rebels, at some point they are from Union. And then people always like to be on the edge of things, but never truly focused and obedient to either side. Understandably, during these times of the restoration period, the gap from both sides is becoming more evident because of the documentation that are being found in the computerized systems who are making, as far as authors studying it, making more profound analysis. And granted that a lot of these authors, they are afraid of saying precisely what then the instructions are saying. What is more important, saving the souls of the people or protecting a tradition? There are times and places or then steps of formation. And from the viewpoint of the divine, it's more important saving the souls than becoming entangled in a tradition. Now, the Greco-Roman translation is an absolute piece of junk of translation, because the problem was the evident status of the time of the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries. A person doesn't have to be an expert in those times, because as we study the language, as we study a bit the history of Yashurun, bear in mind the name of the city bears the name of the divine. As far as the translation, people yet are responsible for what they read. Now, the divine selects obviously those who are obedient and are providing answers regarding sections that unfortunately a lot of people, they don't have any fault of their own other than being lazy and not studying. There is a sense of complacency. But the salvation of the soul requires the very early translation stating the foundation of the apostles and prophets is obviously the holy instructions. And then later on you find a lot of content the Shaliach Shaul said is related with the experiences that these fathers of the church had during their lifetimes. So the transitional time from the first tabernacle services and then the second, not talking about the second temple, talking about the divine being readily available to those people who were searching for the truth. Now you find the scriptures these days extremely confusing. Shaliach Shaul unfortunately was used as a means of bridging what people wished during the first 4 centuries and then the closing of these scripture for the purpose of manipulation. Not a lot of the content, obviously, was manipulated. Great portion of it was. For instance, the writings of the New Testament, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, they do not exist in Hebrew. Ephesians does not. Colossians does not. Galatians does not. Philippians does not. 1st and 2nd T's, they do not exist. Neither Titus. So it's already given you that these Peshitta, the Aramaic English, for instance, can give you bits and pieces of these understandings, and you can be sure of it, at the end of it, you won't save your soul. Because Shaliach Shimon and 2nd Shimon, there is a portion there that states for people being concerned with the salvation of their souls. Now the Torah gives us a portion, for instance in Ecclesiastes, that the breath of life, when a person dies, returns Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and the flesh deteriorates and goes back to the dust. Now the situation of Hamashiach ben Yosef coming back from the dead, there are a couple of areas that should be considered. A, he was talking about the spiritual situations, not truly the physical. At least not during the time of the spring feast. B, the coming from the dead is related with a continuation of the period after the spring feast. Now, if you are a person that believes the New Testament and you don't study the Apostles and Prophets foundation, what kind of a distinction can make at the end in order for you to save your own soul? Because what's coming ever since the Mashiach ben Yosef came, and where we are heading towards the Yom Kippur at the end of it, there is no salvation in it any longer. So then bluntly you find these manuscripts that these people, when they came together, they made salvation as a means of hope after licensing people to sin. It became a fact not to fight against sin, but giving in to sin and giving them a false hope. Now, a lot of people, honest people, great people, they were truly never exposed regarding the enlightenment of the true and clean Torah and the prophets and the writings and even the Psalms. Does it mean at the end of it their souls are going to be saved? No. No person in this earth can be saved without the understanding of the holy instructions. No person. So then those people who say, but those people who are never given the chance of learning, they are lost. Because the light is the Torah. The rest of it is only dark places. So after these people, they began to mix certain sections of the Torah, certain sections of what they wished, certain sections of their own experiences. They began to mix. And then this person, Shaliach Shaul, has taken on another identity. So then, those sections of it, you say, should we continue in sin that then the pardon can amount? And then later on you find pieces that, it's a human nature. So these spiritual conflicts, they were placed there on purpose. So that in order to manipulate the people after giving them license to sin, they had to give them a hope. No responsibility, do what you wish. And then at the end of it, if you're halfway decent, because the divine understand, how hard it is, and then you are saved at the end of it, in spite of what then the Torah has taught. And a lot of people believe it. The trouble is, it won't save their souls. This indicates what the Hamashiach ben Yosef has said, related with only a few. At the end, he was talking of the time of the restoration period, that only a few are going to have this understanding. And then the others, they get so defensive. They're going to try to destroy those who are bringing the light. But the truth of the situation is, when people are humble and they begin their quest understanding the holy language without being mixed up with religion, then the nature of the scripture itself is to guide you. Now it takes a bit of a dedication. If you think there is a divine spirit that's going to teach you without you studying the holy language, it simply doesn't exist. That's what this confusing spirit against the holy instructions gives you, this osmosis understanding, and you are considered then a drunk. In a spiritual sense, from the holy instructions, you are a drunk, because you are dealing with theologies that are from other places other than the holy instructions. Now, when the people are caught in a lie, a lot of them, they get defensive. Understandably, they should, but if they have a scrap of understanding from the divine, they should not be defensive, because if they persist on being defensive, not only they are lost, but they have a pride problem. And those people who are quick to say, these are the very people who are lost and very prideful and very unteachable. That's why the instructions, even in the New Testament, screwed up as it is, a lot of things were invented. Renewing the mind with the holy instructions, with the Torah, with the prophets. And then later to speak. So the analysis is a lot of content from Shaliach Shaul gives you license to sin. And a portion of Shaliach Shaul then maintains loyalty to what then the prophets spoke of centuries ago. And other groups of people, they are snipers. They only hear what is convenient from afar, and you turn around, they stab you in the back. Later on, I'm going to study what Shaliach Shaul has said, and then Shaliach Shimon, because there is an awful lot of time spent with Shaliach Shaul and not much time with the others. And the others, they had a direct contact with Hamashiach ben Yosef. Now then, this person, Shaliach Shaul, then writes 2/3 of what then nothing was new. This Shaliach Shaul simply should be reporting events taking place during the time of the spring feast. Now, there are evidences where the fathers of the church included their own ways mixed up with what then the Hamashiach has said. And in fact, he didn't, because the prophecies, they do not let. Next time I'm going to evaluate more the enlightenment of the spring feast in Revelation, and whatsoever is in the midst of the spring feast in Revelation, I'm going to line up with the prophets. And then we're going to find what those liars have introduced in order to give them false hopes, so then they could dominate the market. Because as you understand, these teachings were related with the taxes. There is absolutely nothing divine in it. These were purely text-basis scripture. And we are going to make an analysis later in understand why. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.